Big Séance Podcast, Episode 60.
Welcome to the Big Séance Podcast. I'm Patrick Keller of BigSeance.com, and this is a place for an open discussion on all things paranormal, but specifically topics like ghosts and hauntings, paranormal research, spirit communication, psychics and mediums, and life after death. So basically, anything that pops up in my paranormal world. The candles are already lit, so you might as well come on in and join the seance.
If you didn't already know, I'm a very nostalgic person. I'm constantly being taken back to an earlier time by a smell, taste, sometimes a sound, and sometimes at the most random times and places, and I love it. I don't know if nostalgia is actually the right term for this, but I think it is a gift to be grateful for. And I don't mean a gift like having psychic abilities or playing an instrument, but I really love nostalgic moments, and I'm always encouraging my senses to catch a ride and take advantage of them. But I'm so very grateful for them because I was fortunate enough to have a great childhood with an amazing family, and I feel like life would be kind of sad without tiny little breaks for a road trip to the past to re-experience some of those great moments. When I was little, I used to spend quite a bit of time with my grandparents at their house. I called them Bamma and Bampa, and I still do. For a while, my Bamma had a fabric shop that I would also spend time in. I loved helping her clean things and organize merchandise, even though I'm not sure I was truly as much help as I thought I was. I can still hear the sound of Bamma's sewing machine running and the soap operas that were on the TV in the background. It's funny, but seeing older daytime TV commercials from that time period, those will put me right back in the fabric shop too. When I think of my time with my Bamma and Bampa in their old house from that time, I think of holidays. I think of different ways my Bamma would entertain me and keep me busy. One of the funny and strange things I always think about is peanut butter and mayonnaise sandwiches. I know. My Bampa, who died several years ago, would make a peanut butter and mayonnaise sandwich for me often. Apparently he used to eat them as a kid, and I've always kind of assumed it was a German thing. I'm not sure. I did learn to love them at the time, though the thought of eating one now makes my stomach turn. Well, cut to a week or so ago, I discovered we have this channel on cable called Antenna TV. Apparently it's been around for a year or two, and I had no clue. Drives me nuts. I wish I would have known, but there are so many shows and sitcoms from the 70s and 80s on this channel. And if you're not careful, you can find yourself skipping a night's sleep just to watch them. I should watch out this summer when I don't have school. But that night, I found myself sucked into an old episode of The Tonight Show with Johnny Carson. I loved Johnny Carson growing up, probably mainly because it was a special moment to be able to stay up late back then. Now, I watched Johnny Carson at my own house growing up plenty of times, but for some reason the other night I was picking up serious nostalgia watching Johnny, and it took me back to Bamma and Bampa's old house. In this particular episode of The Tonight Show, Cass Elliot would make one of her last public appearances before her tragic death from a heart attack. And she was talking to Johnny about health issues she was having involving her heart. But she didn't seem to be taking it too seriously. It was such a kind of a haunting moment. But also on this episode, Johnny was interviewing the hilarious Buddy Hackett. Coming and going from commercial, as the familiar theme song would play, I was taken back, and I was actually in my mom's old bedroom trying to sleep. And this memory, it had me hearing them watch Johnny Carson on the other side of the wall in the living room. So I'm picturing this as I'm hearing the sounds of the show and watching it. And suddenly Johnny and Buddy Hackett make two references to peanut butter and mayonnaise sandwiches, and how the mayonnaise helps the peanut butter go down easier. I'm not sure if that's really why people ate peanut butter and mayonnaise sandwiches, but that's amazing, right? How often do you hear someone bring up peanut butter and mayonnaise in the same sentence? And while you're having an already nostalgic moment about your grandma and grandpa. So I've told myself that this moment of nostalgia was orchestrated by my Bampa. A little hello from the other side. An interesting side note to this story is that within the same week of having this experience, my mom saw a local medium here in Missouri, one whose name I keep hearing about a lot lately. Well, my mom can't stop talking about the connections and validations from this amazing reading that she had. And one of the biggest messages that came through was from my Bampa. Another interesting side note goes back to the reading I received from Dina DeCastro in our first astrology episode a while back. Do you remember her saying that I'd be having more paranormal experiences soon? I wonder if nostalgia is a part of that. I know you all have had to have similar experiences. Some of you are highly intuitive, and some of you have abilities most of us don't have. And so I'm sure there are lots of stories out there similar to this one. Feel free to jump in the Big Séance Parlor on Facebook and share, or email me, or call the feedback line, or click on the SpeakPipe link if you want your voice in the show. All that info can be found in the show notes at bigseance.com, or it can be heard in the outro at the end of the show. I was just recently interviewed on the X Zone radio show with Rob McConnell out of Ontario. I've been listening to Rob's show lately, and it has a very coast-to-coast AM feel to it. It's a syndicated radio show, and he's been at it for 25 years. We talked about cemeteries, paranormal TV shows, EVP, orbs, and other stuff. And you can probably just imagine how nerdy the conversation was. If you're interested in hearing that interview, or if you like drinking games and you want to count how many times I say you know, then I'll put the link to the podcast version of the interview in the show notes. I want to thank Rob and the folks at X Zone Radio for inviting me.
You're listening to the Big Séance Podcast with Patrick Keller. Look for us on iTunes and be sure to check out bigseance.com for more discussion.
Well, it's a short episode this week, but I bet you're ready for another Spectral Edition. Tim Prasil has two early ghost reports from 1865. It's all yours, Tim.
Thank you, Patrick. Welcome to Spectral Edition, in which I read actual ghost reports published in U.S. newspapers between the years of 1865 and 1918. Now, those years are significant. Not only do they begin and end what I see as kind of a swell of these ghost reports, I have found some from earlier and I have found some from later. But those years do seem to mark when these ghost reports were especially popular, and they are also significant in that 1865 was the end of the Civil War, 1918 was the end of World War I. Those dates then form two very historically important bookends to the Spectral Edition project. What I want to do this time is take a look at two articles that were published in that first year of 1865. So they're among my earliest reports. The first one came from the Baltimore Daily Commercial, though at the end of the article it points out that they took the article from the Coldwater Sentinel, a newspaper out of Michigan, and that's something that newspapers did a lot back then, would reprint an article that they found in another newspaper. This one reads as follows. A haunted house. Strange noises are heard o' nights at the house of Mr. Graves, residing a little east of Quincy Center, usually in or about the sleeping room of his little son, about 12 years old. It has caused quite an excitement in the neighborhood, and many have been there to ascertain the cause, and some have continued their investigations during the night, through which the noises were continued at intervals, but their precise location could not be ascertained. They seemed to be in different parts of the room, nor the cause satisfactorily ascertained. Some say it is the work of the spirits, as whenever the voices are heard, a nervous twitching of the boy's muscles are observed, whether sleeping or waking. Occasionally, when the boy goes out, stones are thrown at him by invisible persons, which fall near to him, sometimes hitting the house, but not him. No one seems to be present at such times, except such as are there for the purpose of detecting the trick. Yet, strange to say, no one has yet been seen to throw one of those stones, which seem flying at or towards the boy at all times of the day when he walks out, and many of them have been picked up and preserved in a pile, but no one has yet hit him. The second article is more distinctive in that it sort of veers off into this long editorial passage. It was published on October 14th of 1865 in a newspaper called State Rights Democrat, which was published in Albany, Oregon. A haunted house. Within a stone's throw of Stewart's new marble house on Fifth Avenue is a dwelling really believed to be haunted. It is an imposing and elegant building. It has been occupied and abandoned by 3 families within a few months. It is now in the market. We talk of the 19th century, how enlightened it is, and how bravely we have got over the superstitions of other ages. While the fact is, there is just as much belief here in witches, hobgoblins, ghosts, spirits, and haunted dwellings as there ever was. Spiritualism is only an outlet of the same element. Many men accounted shrewd and intelligent buy and sell and transact their businesses only by consulting some clairvoyant. One man made $40,000 in a whiskey speculation. Guided by a medium, he made a further investment, lost his $40,000, and $20,000 added to it. Yet he has undimmed confidence in mediums. Nobody can tell what is the matter with this house on Fifth Avenue. Externally, it seems all right. The character of the men who have moved out, who have bought it and sold it, indicates plainly that there is trouble somewhere. The popular faith is that it is haunted. You've been listening to Spectral Edition. I'm Tim Prasil, and I have more than 200 of these articles. I post another one each Wednesday on my new website, The Merry Ghost Hunter, MERRY Ghost Hunter. I hope you stop by.
I just had to put my little tea pour intro in there at some point today. Although for me, I always consider it coffee pouring. But I'll let you hear what you want to hear, I suppose. But I wanted to play it for no other reason than because I was just told by my ENT today that I needed to cut way back on my coffee. So tonight, I'll be using my imagination. The nostalgia, if you will, of the good old days with coffee. We'll see how that goes. Hey, 2 quick notes before I leave you. This weekend, I unveiled a store at BigSéance.com. I'm calling it the Paranerd Store, where you can get Big Séance Podcast swag, basically Paranerd stuff. Several very supportive listeners have been asking for a store, and I'm excited to say there have been quite a few sales already. People really jumped on it in the first 2 days alone. You can get regular mugs, like coffee cups, and travel mugs, shirts, hoodies, and even stickers. All sales are through a site called redbubble.com. And right now, I have not marked any of the swag up to make a profit. As I stated in the Big Séance Parlor on Facebook, I wasn't concerned with making a profit. and I was just happy to hear that folks wanted Paranerd merchandise. I just wanted to be clear about that and didn't want people to think I was doing it to make big bucks. Well, I've since heard from many supportive folks who seem to think this is crazy and would apparently feel better purchasing Paranerd swag if they knew it was helping to support the show and the expenses that go into it. This is a hobby, of course, and I want these listeners to know that I appreciate that so many are willing to help support the show. And I suppose there could be a time in the future where I do ask for support in some way. But for now, I'm just going to take some time to think about that. And I guess if you have any opinions or feedback on that matter, feel free to let me know. But go check it out at bigseance.com. If you're on a device, it'll be in the menu under the Paranerd Store. If you're on a computer, it's usually at the top of the page. The Paranerd Store at bigseance.com. As I mentioned in the last episode, this summer I will be attending the Haunted America Conference in Alton, Illinois, which will be held over the weekend of June 24th. Troy Taylor, who was my most recent guest on the show, is the founder of the conference and owner of Haunted America Tours. I'm very much looking forward to it. I'm also looking forward to hopefully bringing you some conversations with a few of the speakers who will be there this summer. I have one interview lined up this weekend, so if all goes well, look forward to that soon. Last quick note. I want to thank rompotchris, I hope I'm saying that right, for the great 5-star iTunes review in the US iTunes Store. You totally rock. Sorry for a shorter episode. Maybe some of you are like, yes, short episode today. Maybe that should be our Paranerd hashtag. Let's do it. If you made it to the end, tweet me at Big Séance with the hashtag short episode. That's hashtag short episode. Peace out, Paranerds.
For show notes, including links to anything we may have mentioned in this episode, visit bigseance.com, now the home of both the blog and the podcast. Just click on the Big Séance Podcast logo or find it in the menu. You can also find and subscribe to the show on iTunes and Stitcher. Do you have any comments or feedback? Please contact me at patrick@bigseance.com. You can call my feedback line at 7755-TELL-ME. That's 775-583-5563. You can also record audio feedback right from the site using the SpeakPipe link included in the show notes. I could decide to include your voice in a future show. Thank you so much for listening and reading. Unfortunately, it's time to blow the candles out, but we'll see you and light them again next time.